Hello, Sociology of Sexuality students, and welcome to your unit number 7 overview. We are in the last bit. We got unit 7, which is the last half of November, and then unit number 8, which is the first half of December, and that's it. So we are literally in the final countdown for our course. Please remember that one of your one-sentence summaries and one of your quick fact check-ins are dropped from the gradebook at the end of the semester. Or said another way, one of each of those doesn't really count. So I built that into the syllabus so that you could skip a unit of your choice. So if you haven't taken advantage of that yet, definitely think about taking advantage of it now as you head into finals and the holidays and, all of that. So this is the step-by-step guide. Instead of me making an additional video for task 3 going over the content, I've actually uploaded a video from someone else who I think will guide you very clearly and succinctly and in the spirit of fierce advocacy for justice through the specific theme for our unit. So let's go take a look at unit number 7 together. Our homepage for Sociology of Sexualities. You can see that your final is already up over here. And as you scroll down to the units, you'll see that number 7 and number 8 are both available. So I've gone ahead and put up everything so that if you decide that you want to work ahead, you can go ahead and totally work ahead. So unit number 7 runs from November 15th through the 24th. The 24th is that Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Technically we have off the 25th through the 28th. So this is, sort of like a week and a half. As usual, there are 5 tasks for this unit, and this unit is continuing to build on what we've been learning about all semester, which is how sexuality intersects with our race and ethnicity and other aspects of identity to inform how we experience things, whether it's straight privilege, heterosexism, homophobia, right, depending on our own identifications of our own sexuality. This unit is looking at queer Caribbeans against colonial, racist, heteronormative oppression. So queer Caribbeans, both meaning the verb as in queering, right? So queering, what it means to be someone in the Caribbeans, from the Caribbeans, and also people who are identified as queer and Caribbean, right? The Caribbeans have been the site of much colonial violence, and so what does it mean then to act against the ways in which colonizers come in with their own expectations of gender and sexuality, and what that means today in a sort of neo-colonial sense. So this is another example of why an intersectional lens is so important. Again, those grade reminders, remember to check the grade book, see where you're at, see if you can skip a quick facts check-in and a one-sentence summary if you haven't yet already. Remember that you are aiming for 93 points. We are a 100-point class. 93 is an A. Maybe you're aiming for a B, and that would be in the 80 points range. So you can see how many points that you have currently on Blackboard, and then look at what's left to complete in Unit 7 and 8 and our final, and figure out, how much work you are capable of putting in and how much work you are capable of completing between now and the end of the semester in order to reach your goal grade. I also ask you to just make sure I didn't make any mistakes. I try very hard not to make mistakes, and I double check my work, but I do on occasion make a mistake. I can fix errors now easily. It's much harder for me to fix grades after grades have been turned in, right? So you want to make sure that you're double checking everything, now before grades are due, before February, right? To make sure that everything looks correct. So this video will be right here, and then you'll continue on. You have another discussion board post. You'll land on the discussion board page, find your group. You'll see that unit number 7 and unit number 8 are both available to be completed. For unit number 7 and unit number 8, I'm asking you to change it up just a little bit. So instead of creating your own caption, and explaining why you wanted to share it, now that we're this far along in the semester, I want you to be able to focus on the social media page itself. So share the caption for the post that, for example, the Queer March shared, or Glisten, or Black and Pink. Then, instead of explaining to me and your classmates why you wanted to share this post, share why you think the organization posted that particular thing. So many of you have been sharing posts that are really interesting, like sex worker rights organizations posting pictures from 1970s, LGBTQ pride events, or queer organizations posting about homelessness or body positivity, right? So what does it mean, right? Put those things together, piece together that puzzle for us. Why, for example, would SWAP, a sex workers outreach organization, post about housing insecurity or HIV and AIDS stigma, right? So applying your fierce advocacy for sexuality justice lens here at the end of the semester. And again, as always, commenting on at least one group member's post. Remembering that your discussion boards are a substantial part of the grade overall, so continuing to do that for this unit and the next unit will help ensure that your grade is, fairly solid. As always, I suggest it's due in the middle of the unit, so for this one, between Friday the 19th and Monday the 22nd. As always, the due date on Blackboard is the 19th, so that way it kicks out that little reminder, if you haven't done it, that something is due or overdue. Again, you can totally turn it in late, no loss of points. Now we get into the heart of the unit, what I want you to read, watch, and hear. So for task 3, again, instead of me posting a vignette of the content, I decided to introduce you to a scholar, Angelique Nixon, and she's going to talk about the elements of decolonial healing justice. I think it's important sometimes to hear from people whom the topic is about, rather than just me as a white femme professor talking about it. And so, use her words to guide you as you read through the requirements for this unit. Then I want you to read the introduction from a book called Thieving Sugar, Eroticism Between Women in Caribbean Literature. When you click on it, it will take you to a link to go to the book presses page. This is Duke University. So you have to click here to download it, and then you'll have it. Although this chapter is focused on representations in literature, right, in books, right, and things that we read, you can often think about this as an analysis of material culture, an example of how these norms around gender, sexuality, and race are embedded in literature that we read, that we consume, that might inspire us or guide us or even upset us. Then 2 more academic readings. One from Kempadu is a piece about decolonizing, right, the sexual economic praxis in the Caribbean. So there's a lot of big words here, right? Decolonization, economic praxis, sexual economic praxis, right? Colonization was the practice of a country going to another country and then somehow claiming that country as their own, right? So very violent, very oppressive, right? So think of Britain going in to India and being like, yeah, this is our country now. The U.S., we still do this when we think of like Puerto Rico, Hawaii, which we did make a state. There are many examples of how the colonial past is still impacting us today, in addition to what we call neo-colonial practices. So we no longer have to go over and plant a flag and say this country belongs to us, right, in that very violent way. Instead, we colonize through media, through tourism, through crossing boundaries and borders, our own policies about embargoes and what goods can or cannot flow, right, between countries. So that's what neo-colonialism looks like. So still very violent and very oppressive. And you often see this in quote-unquote first world powers. So countries that have long benefited off the colonization of other countries like the UK, Canada even, the United States, Spain, and then looking at how that impacts other countries, sometimes called third world, but really what we say now are south world countries. Praxis is the idea that theory, thought, and action all inform one another, right? So thinking through what sexual economic practices in the Caribbean look like, but more than that, thinking through what they look like from a perspective of decolonizing the ways in which Caribbean people have been forced to live for generations now, right? So Kempadu goes over, right? Over the years, various Caribbean scholars, including herself, have questioned how he can imagine Caribbean sexual economic praxes, not just as merely survival strategies or expressions of heteropatriarchy or merely legacies of colonialism and hypersexualized oppressions, but also as embodied practices that are deeply entangled with the region's economic fabric. Like, what? That is a really intense first sentence. Trust me, as you continue on, this will start to make sense. And so, this isn't actually a very long piece, but it's a really thoughtful piece. So take your time with it. She provides a lot of background that will help you understand what it is that you're reading in this particular unit. As always, pay attention to the bolded subheadings. If you are somebody who, like me, likes to read the footnotes, you'll see that this is actually an excerpt from a talk that was given at the National Women's Studies Association conference. The National Women's Studies Association is the professional organization for people who are in or study gender, women, and sexuality studies in the United States. And they are having their annual conference in Puerto Rico, which, again, is part of the United States. We have colonized it, but they have no rights, right? So they cannot vote. It's not something where, Puerto Rico is not the 51st state, nor do they want to be the 51st state. Then I'm asking you to read a piece by Jody Rory, who is actually a scholar here at John Jay in the Latin American and Latinx Studies Department. So Rory wrote a piece for a journal. It will bring up the whole academic journal, right? I'm not asking you to read the whole academic journal. This was a particular special topic that they did on human rights and uprising. And so I just want you to read her piece, The Re-Emergence of Barriers During Crises and Natural Disasters. She's looking at how gender-based violence, like domestic violence, sexual assault, spikes among women and LGBTQ plus persons during confinement, right? So here referencing COVID. You scroll down, you can see hers starts on page 23, I believe. Yeah, 23. So again, this is an academic article. So this is her reporting her research in a way to communicate with other scholars and scholar activists. I know that we are a 200 level class, but you have been really awesome all semester, and I'm very confident that you can understand what it is that she is reporting on, that you can understand what her research is about, and that you can understand her conclusions. Sometimes with academic readings, particularly academic journal articles, I like to jump ahead and read the conclusion first, because that's usually where academics say what they mean, and then go back and read the intro, look at the bolded subheadings, and allow myself to make sense of it by taking notes. So remember to be careful when you're reading this piece, because we're talking about gender and sexuality, which are two different aspects of identity, right? We tend to put it all together into this, alphabet soup of LGBTQ, Two-Spirit, QQIAA+++. But really here what she's talking about, is both gender and sexuality. So make sure to make that clear in anything that you're writing or sharing, like, for example, in your one-sentence summary. Then I want you to read an activist piece from the website Everyday Feminism. Just scroll down. Called My Feminism is Black, Intersectional, and Womanist, and I Refuse to be Left Out of the Movement. So this is really focusing on U.S. feminisms, but I want to make sure that in this particular piece around queer Caribbean culture that we are aware of what it means to engage in feminist advocacy and how feminists sometimes disagree. And so you'll see that in the Kempadu piece, you'll see that here, particularly among Black feminists in the United States. Some feminists in, struggling with the ways in which white supremacy and racism infiltrate every aspect of society. So too have feminists of color had to struggle with the ways in which white supremacy and racism has infiltrated the mainstream feminist movement, right? So you think about, Sheryl Sandberg, or the idea of like, oh, women just need to lean in and have a seat at the table. We just need more women CEOs and more women politicians and it'll all be good. And studies show that that is not necessarily true because of the ways that our identities are very intersectional. So it's not just about gender, right? Everyone who identifies as women do not have the same experiences of sexism, sexist violence, and oppression, right? It's often mediated by our race, our age, our ethnicity, our religion, right? Other aspects of identity that impact how we can navigate the social world and how the social world sees us and interacts with us. And so you'll see and learn about how Black women who are concerned about both racial equality and equity and gender equality and equity sometimes don't use the word feminism, the F word, but instead call themselves womanists. And this started like in the 70s as a way to call out the racism that was mainstreaming in mainstream feminist movements, as well as a way to call in, right, other Black gender justice advocates and other advocates of color to say, like, this is a safe space. This is a space where we recognize, right, this intersectional way that understands the intersectional way that oppressions impact us on a daily basis. She doesn't get into it here, but, you know, I also want you to think about what it means to use the word womanist and the ways in which for Black trans people, sometimes that has been very off-putting as well. So our languages are very incomplete. Our language itself is embedded with language of colonization. Our language itself can be very oppressive and limiting. So I want you to listen to a podcast. This is a post that they did about a Haitian single mother here in Brooklyn named Jewel. But I just want you to listen to part of one of their podcasts. It could be any podcast of your choice. It doesn't necessarily have to be about Jewel. But these are two queer Caribbean Black academics, right? So they self-identify as queer Caribbean Black academics. You know, wordplay, super fun. Also a really good way to queer language, right? So you can explore their previous episodes here. And again, you know, I know you may not necessarily listen to the whole thing, but try to listen to as much as you can. Especially to help you understand what it is that you perhaps read in Thieving Sugar, what you read about Kempadu talking about decolonizing sexual economic praxis, what you read about how gender-based violence spikes among women and LGBTQ persons during times of crises, whether it's, you know, something like an earthquake or what we've been experiencing for over a year and a half now, with COVID-19. Then, as always, there's a quick facts check-in. It's your second to last one. I want to point out that the third question is about that video that I want you to watch with Angelique Nixon talking about decolonial healing. So take those notes. And then, as always, the one-sentence summary. I have this due on the 24th, so midweek, a little bit different than usual because of the holiday. And, you know, really just focusing on the theme. What does Caribbeans decolonizing gender, sexual identity, and race mean for whom, when, where, how, and why, right? So obviously we're talking about queer Caribbeans, right? But break this down, right? Be able to summarize what you've read into a single sentence, something that could act as a tweet, something that could act to explain what it is to someone not in this class, what this unit is about. So that is it for unit number 7, our second to last unit. Again, this one's a little bit shorter because of the holiday, but, you know, if you need to take that time, looking at my calendar, you know, post that holiday weekend, you know, before the 29th of November, that's totally fine. But also think about how maybe you want to get to work on unit number 7 and unit number 8, our last unit, and so figure out how you want to divide up that time. If you have any late work, please, 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 please go ahead and get it done. I will accept late work, no points off, particularly for things that have been, that are late or missing from the second half of the semester. So units 5, 6, right? Now we're in 7 and 8. Many of you many of you are totally up and on it and are, you know, totally on track to earn a really awesome grade in this class. For others, you know, who have been communicating with me and we've been working out plans of action, thank you so much. And if you are someone who would like to communicate with me to perhaps, you know, talk about your progress in the class, work out a plan of action to ensure your success for these last few weeks, please do reach out. Our final is merely your third assessment worksheet. So there's no additional comprehensive final, no additional comprehensive, you know, There's no test. There's no no multiple choice tests, no additional long essay, right? We are a 200 level class, and so I'm working on ensuring that you can reflect back on what it is that you have been learning this semester. And the way I've been doing that is through those assessment worksheets. So please reach out if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see your work online, and thank you so much for watching.